This week, these three players missed their penalty shots in the Euro Cup final, and all three of them were subject to racial abuse. And the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he quite rightly condemned the appalling racial things that were said against these players. But here's the problem. In the games leading up to the final, the English side were taking the knee. And we've seen this action before where sports people kneel before the game in protest against racial inequality and discrimination and hate and all those things. And there were fans who were booing it. There were parts of the media who were against it. And there were people saying some horrible things just at that action of kneeling before the game. And one UK politician said that taking the knee was just gesture politics, that it was all done for theatre, all done for publicity and attention. Now, of course, it's the right thing that the UK Prime Ministers and others came out and spoke against the racial abuse that these three players faced. But it was the failure to speak in their defence in the lead up to that, which some people have recognised as hypocrisy. One of the English players has since said, "You don't get to stoke the fire at the beginning of the tournament by labelling our anti-racism measure as gesture politics, and then pretend to be disgusted when the very thing we're campaigning against happens." Leaders set the culture. In our country, the Australian former MP, Julia Banks, has released a book in which she alleges there is a very toxic sexist culture in Australian politics and in political parties, including the party of which she was a member. And she said things got worse under our current Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. That's her version of things, and of course others can disagree. But the leaders set the culture. And it's not to say that setting the culture is easy, and it's not to say that a leader can be responsible for everything that happens under them. But what leaders do is they have an opportunity to signal what is acceptable, what we stand for, the values that we represent. And for better or worse, they set that standard. They tell us what should be accepted and what we should rise to. And they also call out actions that fall short. In this gospel reading today, the leader Jesus has to set the culture for his disciples. And the reading begins with this account of how the disciples have been busy. He's sent them out 2 by 2 and he's given them a mission, and they're casting out demons and healing the sick. They're doing all the kinds of things that Jesus himself has been doing. And then we're told that they gather back to Jesus and they tell him what's going on. And he has to say to them, "Come away now. Come away to a deserted place, because there is too much going on." They don't even have time to rest. And the leader Jesus has to set the culture. Come away now and rest for a while. And I've always heard this passage preached and read on it as being about a warning against too much busyness, about the importance of rest and recharging. And the problem is the disciples get into the boat with Jesus, and the crowds, they see what's going on, so they chase after them again. And instead of sending them away, Jesus feeds the crowd. He teaches them and feeds them with the miracle of the 5,000. And it's as if the need of the crowd sort of trumps their need to rest. Or so I thought. And then I came across this really helpful reading which suggests that the problem Jesus has to rescue the disciples from is not just their busyness. It's the law and the danger of the crowd. Because these disciples, they've been sent out and they've been doing this fantastic work of healing and casting out spirits and preaching, and there's this frenzied kind of manic quality to what's happening. We're told there's no time to eat, no time for anything. Things are out of balance. And that's what Jesus has to rescue, to pull them back from. It's not just about resting, it's getting away from the crowd that is placing too much upon them. And it's as if that membrane between what the disciples are meant to do and who they're meant to represent has grown too thin. from the crowd. And they're at risk of losing touch with who they are, against the demands of what the crowd wants of them. And that's what crowds can do. In the Gospels and in life, crowds can draw you from yourself. It can subsume you. And crowds, in the Gospels at least, can turn violent. And maybe what's going on isn't just this need to rest, although that's important. It's getting away from the gravitational pull of a crowd or a culture that sucks you in. And so the danger, it's not just that you can kind of forget to eat and be too busy. It's forgetting who you are because the crowd and the culture are telling you something else. The leader sets the culture. In this passage, it's about resetting with Christ at the centre. There's a theory around, it's called social proximity theory, and it's really simply that the people you have in your life, the people you spend most time with, not only do you, because of that time you spend, you grow to like them more and more, but you begin to mimic them. You adopt their way of thinking and speaking and their behaviours and all of those things. These here are cliches, and I think they're put in two absolute terms, but you get the sense. Tell me who you hang around, and I will tell you who you become. Or, you are the average of the 5 people who you spend the most time with. Surrounding yourself with people who have a higher standard than you is the fastest way to change. You cannot hang out with negative people and expect to live a positive life. And I see this every day in the jail. I see time and time again people who do so well with us. Once they're released, it all quickly falls apart because they're going back into the same groups and the same lives that they knew. Who we have at the centre of our lives, it affects us, the way we think, the way we act, the things we stand for. Cultures have power over us. It's not the case that every politician in Canberra is sexist. Julia Banks is the first to say that. She says she met great people, good-hearted people. The problem becomes with culture, when systems are just unprepared or simply don't know how or recognise the problem of what's taking place. And so sometimes cultures can tacitly condone what's going wrong because it accepts them. And I suppose that's the danger, that people can be the gravitational pull of cultures or systems. It draws you from your values and what you represent. And it just sort of, that silent inertia of this is how things are done, suddenly trumps what we believe and know to be right. Leaders have a role. They set the culture. And in this passage from Mark, I see Jesus doing more than just saying we need to rest. It's an invitation to put himself at the centre of their being and their mission. And that's why he can go about that healing and feeding of the 5,000. Even though everyone's tired, he can do that because he's got the disciples around him now. They've reset, he's at the centre, and so they can go about that business. It is important to rest, but I think this passage is asking us to see that the disciples needed to gather around Jesus again. I asked a young man at jail in this place, in this chapel, some questions this week, and he's had a really difficult life, and he really wants to do well, and he wants to adopt a really positive mindset to overcome the challenges in front of him. And so what he wants to do is to face his problems with a really positive energy. So we started talking about that, and what does that look like? And so I asked him, I said, okay, well let's try it. Is there anything good about being locked up? And he said, yes, there is. Sometimes life outside is so out of control and you're so in the gang world that you could kill or be killed. Or you're doing so much drugs that you could overdose at any time. Coming into lockup is that circuit breaker. And I said, what about, the disappointment when you get denied bail and you have to stay here? He said, well, that tells you that maybe you need to do more work on yourself. Maybe there's more qualifications that you can do in lockup. Maybe you can continue on that path to being a better man. I said, what about all those friends who said they'd had your back and they'd write to you and call you, and you've never heard from them since you've been in prison? And he said, well, that shows you who your fake friends and your real friends are. And I asked him to think about the lockdown for our communities. And I said, is there anything good that can come of that? And he had to think about it, and he said, well, that's how we're going to get the virus under control. That's what's going to help keep people safe, our families safe. And then he pushed on and he said, well, and maybe families will have a bit of time at home to just be with each other and enjoy that company and get the rest and the leisure they need. And this young guy, he understands you can't just overcome bad things with positive thinking. He's been through too much. His hardship is real. But what he's trying to do is to adopt a way of thinking that is going to help him through the hard times and not succumb to what is difficult and the negative thoughts that can come about. We all know that this COVID lockdown is hard and it's hurting people financially and emotionally and psychologically. And it is so easy as we go through week after week to succumb to negative thoughts. But we believe, as people of faith, we believe that we have a God who loves us. And this time forced on us through this pandemic is this opportunity for us to look at ourselves and ask, do I need to reset? I'm away from the crowd, I'm away from the busyness of my life, probably a life that I really enjoy, but is there something that needs recalibration, that needs a reset, where we can see that Jesus is no longer at the centre of our lives and what has to change? Someone once said, getting stuck is not the problem. Staying stuck is. Good learners practice getting unstuck. We all get stuck sometimes. Getting stuck is not the problem. Staying stuck is. Good learners practice getting unstuck. That saying uses the word learners. In our church life, we use the word disciples. It's a Greek word that means one who learns, a student, an apprentice, a pupil. We could read into that saying, good disciples practice getting unstuck, not by their own strength only, but by the help of our great God. And so, O Lord, where we need, help us to reset. And if there are parts of our lives that have become stuck, help us to become unstuck and help us to reset now with you at the centre. And remind us that the culture and the crowd, sometimes they want us to be things or to do things that are different to what you would have us be and do. And if in our lives we're feeling stuck, if we recognise there are things that need to change, help us in this time now to reset, to reorient ourselves and to put Jesus at the centre. The Lord be with you.